Welcome to the Birth Launch Podcast, an empowering space for expecting and new parents to hear candid conversations with experts and learn how to craft your ideal birth. We will tackle the scary and weird questions that come up along the way and provide answers that are driven by science and evidence-based recommendations. I'm going to show you how to redefine parenthood and choose what's best aligned for you and your goals. With 10 years of experience in family education and a master's degree in human development and family studies, I'm ready to help you navigate pregnancy and explore your birth options to free yourself of fear surrounding childbirth. My goal is to help you have an informed and confident labor experience, plus an empowered and joyous postpartum. Jami, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited for this conversation because it is
Me
one
too.
that everybody needs. If you're having a baby, you go through this process. And I think everybody finds themselves being like, where do we even start? Like, I have so many questions. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't really know what I'm looking for. I know what I want. But then every time I go on Google, there's a million options and I get so confused. So I'm very
Yep.
excited to have you here to share what we should be looking for when we are picking out car seats and strollers and systems and considering our lifestyle. I know that there's a lot of things to think. And so
Yep.
that's why I wanted to have you on the show. So welcome. I'm excited
Yeah,
to dive in.
thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. Okay. So I think logically, the first question that people have is what do I need to be considering? Obviously, safety, but what else should
Yeah.
we be thinking about when it comes to car seats and strollers?
Yep. I think from an infant perspective, when you're dealing with someone who's going through this the first time, we like to take the approach of starting with the stroller. The stroller is going to be the thing that you're going to have for the longest length of time. And it's your lifeline. It's how you're going to get around with your little one, potentially a second one, if that's a consideration. Our approach is definitely to start with the stroller. But it's not arbitrary. It's not just walking around and looking at a bunch of pretty things. It's really asking a lot of questions to get to know the families, to make them start to think about things in a little different way. I think it's so easy to go to Google and say, best stroller, what's the best? And you're going to get targeted in so many ways, but you really don't know what to ask for. This is something totally new. You don't know what you don't know. So, coming into us, one of the first things that we do is say, all right, where do you live? And I don't really care where you live, but I want to know, what are your sidewalks like? Where are you going to be strolling? Do you go to the beach? What is your day in the life? And while you might not realize what that is when you have a baby, you do have an idea of what it is right now. And I can tell you, you will probably never look at a sidewalk in the same until you're pushing a stroller over it. Taking a look at, what is my terrain? Where am I going to go? For me, for instance, I live in Marblehead. Our tree roots rip up our sidewalks. We have a ton of cobblestone, we have a rail trail with gravel, a path. We go to the beach. Those are all things that really make or break your stroller. My husband and I, when we first took over the store, we read an article that said, in the life of a child's stroller life, it's common for a family to have 7 strollers. And I truly thought that was pretty insane until I started working with people and I realized how easy it was to actually happen. And our true goal is to get one stroller for you that does the majority of things, and hopefully you love it. So yeah, that's where we start.
Okay, I have so many questions.
I know. I figured I would take a break.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so when we think about where we live, let's think about, or I guess, what should we be thinking about? I know that, so our team has met with Jami before. That's how I knew she was like the perfect expert for this. You said something to me that blew my mind. So I grew up in Mississippi. Obviously, we didn't live in places that have elevators. And when I moved to Boston, I've always been on the second floor. So one flight of stairs doesn't really ring any bells. I never considered, even though I have a million clients that live on the 8th floor, no elevator. You were like, what do you do if you have no elevator, only stairs, and
Mm,
you need a heavy stroller, and you need this? You have to think about storage.
yeah.
What are the other things that we should be thinking about in terms of maybe our homes and our cars in terms of using it?
Yeah, we get a lot of people coming from all different areas, right? Whether it's Boston, Cambridge, whatnot. And so when we hear that, we typically go a little bit further and we say, all right, describe to me, what floor are you on? What is your entryway? What type of shared space do you have? Where do you park? If you are parking directly in front of your house and your car's there, then we can take into consideration, all right, let's throw your frame of your stroller in your car and then you carry up the bassinet or whatever that may be. So I do think that when I get clients in that are from the city and from areas with some of those considerations, where I find they haven't started thought of is they think of one thing or the other, but they don't think of it in an entire cohesive picture, right? So they might think, all right, these are what my sidewalks are like. They're cobblestone brick or whatnot. So I know I need something really good. But then they also think, "Oh, I need lightweight, I need small." And unfortunately, those two things just don't really coexist in this world of strollers. The lighter and the smaller you go, the more you're sacrificing all-terrain suspension, that really quality push that you're hoping to get if you are out and about and living in the city and want to enjoy your strolls. I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all approach. I think that it's really making a list of certain things, like, where can I store my stroller? Do I expect me to take it inside? Do I have a place where I can leave it temporarily while I take the baby upstairs in a bassinet, run down, get my frame, and bring it up? Where am I going to store it inside? Is it going to be on the wall? Is it going to be in a closet? There's a lot of factors. I think that when you come to us again, we ask, and I do think it's really challenging to really simply ask 5 questions and say, "Okay, that's it." Because I think that it's very much it's working with those families and determining all of those things. Some people come to us and say, "I want a stroller that it can expand and add a second kiddo." But once they get into the nuts and bolts of that and figure out, like, I might not, I'm living in the city now, but I might not, then they decide maybe that's not the right path to go because they're dealing with a bigger stroller or more components and everything. I will tell you that a lot of people have one idea when they walk through our store, and we tend to blow up all of those ideas and start from scratch. And I think that this is the problem with the Googling and the influencers and all this stuff in this day and age is that you hear it, you see it, do this research, but you're inundated with it all the time. And I think we start with brands and we start with these things that we see people in social media pushing and thinking that must be the best, but that just doesn't mean it's the best for you.
Yeah. Like you said, it's a lifeline. Like you use it every single day. It's literally an integral
Yeah.
part of your lifestyle, right? The way that you
Yeah.
live, you need it. You don't need it, but it sure is a convenience to have when you're trying to cart your kid or kids somewhere and get your family in a group to a place and back.
Yeah.
Certainly. Okay, so you mentioned lightweight. Let's talk about the weight and maybe like durability of strollers. What should people be thinking about there and also how that fits into their lifestyle?
Yeah. Again, when I talk to people about this, about the conversation with strollers, I usually will say something to the effect of, "Hey, we want to get you one stroller that does the majority of things with the exception of 2 things. One is jogging. Jogging stroller is truly a jogging stroller, and there are features and components of someone who's jogging that just aren't always going to be the best features for someone who's strolling. For instance, a three-wheel stroller is not the most stable stroller over uneven ground. It's going to have a tipping factor. You also have a lot of limitations in how you can use that stroller in the first 6 months with your baby. You're not going to get an extended parent-facing mode, and studies show that from a speech development perspective and a bonding perspective, the more we can have our baby facing us for the first couple of years, like, it does have a really solid impact on those things. So that doesn't mean that people are behind if they choose a jogging stroller, but I do think that sometimes we get the people in with looking at a jogging stroller with no intention on jogging, but think that's the only thing that they can push because that's what's going to push in their area. So then the second thing would be that small overhead compartment type of travel stroller. And in typical cases, when we do registries for families, we will usually say, hold off on that. You can't use a travel stroller for the first 6 months in most cases without the usage of a car seat, and we'll get into my feelings about that later, but I just think that we don't need to load you up with two strollers on day one. If you can't use your travel stroller the majority of time until they're about 6 months, like hold off, wait on that and focus on the everyday day-to-day stroller that is going to have the longest longevity, that it's going to be the best use of your dollars, it's going to be the best use of that investment, and let's focus there first. And maybe we can get you a little lighter, but maybe not go all the way into a lightweight category, which isn't going to have great suspension or all-terrain wheels, and it'll have limited use cases in terms of parent facing, outward facing, that kind of thing.
Where do you need to live to use a lightweight stroller? Somewhere that has all flat lands, like
Yeah, I
flat,
mean,
glossy,
again,
smooth.
I think it depends on what people are thinking of in terms of a lightweight stroller. A lightweight stroller could be a 13-pound or a 9-pound stroller, or some people like myself consider an everyday lightweight stroller a 22-pound stroller. Because I think that the problem is that people are looking at these all-inclusive weights, but that means
Mm,
everything included in the stroller. In most cases, when you have a stroller with a seat that faces both directions, you're going to take the seat off, but you're going to take some of those things off. So you're really folding the frame, and it could be 16 pounds or 17 pounds. I think that a lightweight stroller to me, it depends on the category in which you're looking. So if you're looking at a travel stroller, then that's just one particular category. I think you can have a lighter weight stroller, like a 22-pound stroller, like the Bugaboo Fox, where you're getting the best of both worlds. It's not going to expand at a second kiddo, but it's going to be on the lighter side, but still have really great suspension and a really great all-terrain wheel. And in terms of, I think, like where you live, you asked me like, where do you live or when would that be the use case?
yeah, like
I mean,
where should someone live?
I don't even know if it's where you live. I think it's how you envision using this, right?
Mm,
You get some people in, or some people come in and they'll say to me, I'm not strong. I cannot envision a world where I feel like I can lift X weight all the time. I also think that when we're doing this research in the beginning, when you're brand new, we really don't know what to research for. So these manufacturers, they have these like keywords, and they have these like features that grab people, but when you get into the life of a baby, they really don't mean as much to you at that point in time. Single-handed folded strollers, okay? I can tell you that there isn't a single point in time where I was holding my child and folding my stroller and trying to get that into the car. I'm dealing with my child first. I'm putting them in the car. I'm then going around to the back of my car and I'm picking up my stroller and putting it in my car. It doesn't mean that there isn't a use case for it, but I think that we all think, okay, I'm always going to be holding my child. I'm always going to try and be folding the stroller. And you don't have to always do those things together. Peep windows on car seats and strollers, like to me, they're like such a silly thing. I think that it's something people will ask you about all the time. And you're like, okay, it's hardly a thing you're probably going to use when you really get into life of it. It shouldn't make or break a stroller. So
yes,
I
I do
think,
know. That makes so much sense when you put it
you
like
know,
that.
yeah. And again, I think that I'm not going to say to you, if you live in this town or you live in this place, then you don't need this type of stroller, because it also depends on where you're going outside of that place. But I do think that when I talk to my families who they live 3 floors up, they're dealing with stairs or whatnot, we're trying to find a middle ground
Hmm.
somewhere in that 22-pound range, maybe 21-pound range. Still good all terrain, good suspension, because hardly anywhere in Boston that you're going to be pushing, you're not going to have some sort of cobblestone, some sort of brick. I live on the North Shore. A lot of our customers are on the North Shore. That's just what we deal with on a day to day. There's hardly a place where you go where the majority of your pushing is going to be on a very smooth surface.
Yeah.
So, for those,
This podcast in particular is global. So is there a
yeah,
way that you
okay.
could speak to something more national? I was thinking more. So in my brain, here's how it played out. When I grew up down south, pretty much everywhere we went was either you got your car seat out, you put it in a paved parking lot, and then you went into a store that had the smooth, hard surface that was easy. It's not like we went out on the farm and needed a stroller to go out in the farm. So I was envisioning my mom being able to do that. We were always on a hard surface. It was always smooth. You didn't really take a stroller to the beach. Like even vacations, you're walking around theme parks and museums, always places that are smooth. Is that somebody that would be able to use something that had a smaller wheel?
The problem is that when you go, the smaller you go in that case, you're usually sacrificing features, right? So you're getting a stroller. When you talk about a travel stroller, a small scale stroller, you're typically getting a stroller that's outward facing only. But you're not, so when you think about
Mm.
most travel strollers, there's a few exceptions, but most travel strollers that are going to be very small, can go in the overhead compartment or whatnot, they're going to be, you can't use them until the child's 6 months without the use of a car seat. That you're not going to have that option for maybe a bassinet or parent facing. So for someone who does have the smooth surfaces, who is looking for that stroller that where they don't need quite the same suspension all terrain, then there is a middle ground. Absolutely. There are several strollers out there that like the Nuna Triv or
Mm.
the Bugaboo Dragonfly and things that aren't, they have some suspension, they're smoother wheel, they aren't meant to necessarily take the cobblestone and the brick, but you're going to get that feature set of having a bassinet, baby facing you for a longer length of time. You're not going to be limited to only using it with the car seat from infancy. You're going to have a lot more longevity with that stroller versus a true travel stroller, which is going to be outward facing only, and you're really only able to use it with the car seat.
Mm-hmm.
To segue into the car seat component, MSDPST, so we heavily educate on use cases of car seats. Car seats are very much designed for safety and not development. So the idea here is that we're limiting the length of time a child's in a car seat to 90 minutes at a time. If you think about it, babies are at an angle, you have to buckle them in just like they're in a car seat or just like they're in a car, regardless of whether it's on the stroller or whether it's in the car. There's no airflow. They cannot move their body, they cannot shift, and they do have chin to chest, so that gives them a decrease in their airway. So I am always going to educate, car seats are for cars. Quick trips, no problem, but I want to see a baby laying flat. That's much more developmentally appropriate. Many of these bassinets are rated for overnight sleeping, so it's also a nice way of spreading those costs. But get those babies out of car seats.
So can I assume that you're not a fan of the Duna?
So that's a slippery slope and a tricky one for me because, of course, I
Okay.
do sell the Duna, but I will have very in-depth, long conversations with people when they come to me and ask my opinion about that. There's absolutely a use case for it, but what I
Sure.
really want to get across to people is this is a car seat on wheels. This is not a stroller. I have several customers that they live in the city, whether it's Boston, New York, or whatever, and they do park far away from their homes. They do not have elevators. They don't have the ability to always be able to take their stroller and carry the stroller in the car seat upstairs. So they're like, hey, I have my stroller. That's what I use 90% of the time, but I need to be able to get out of my parking garage and get my baby into the car without lugging it under my arm all the time. Absolutely. There's a great use case for it. But the idea that it's your stroller for the first year, it just doesn't get baby out of that car seat. It's positional asphyxiation. I always have a hard time with that word. We got to get babies out of car seats.
Yeah. I
That's the
mean,
reality. So,
yeah, you're also slipping into that realm of like container syndrome where we're not letting our
yes.
babies move. We're not getting that upright time. Not that would necessarily cause flathead, but it definitely is pressure on the back of their head. It's different than always lying
Yeah.
down, but they're not getting that tummy time. They're not getting that sensory input that is needed. Yeah, okay, cool. I think we feel very similar about the Duna. It's not a bad product, but you have to be
Right.
intentional about the use. And so that makes me really happy to hear. I
I know. And this is a conversation we'll be talking to somebody. We have people that pop in and they sing Duna's praises. And I'm not trying to trash the product by any means, but I
No.
will ask very, distinct questions. I also think that a lot of people don't think about how heavy it is to pick it up from the ground up.
Mhm.
They think about out of the car with the wheels, but you get a 10, 15-pound baby in that Duna, and it is heavy to pick it up from the ground into your car.
Yeah.
It's also short-lived. If you get a travel stroller, if you get like a butterfly or a travel stroller, that stroller is going to take you until your child's 50 pounds. So you're going to have a car seat that you can now have the flexibility to go in the car, on the plane, in one stroller, and in the next. And if you're needing a travel component, get a travel stroller. And then when you're done with the infant bucket, you still have a stroller that you can use. But I'll see people coming in, babies 4 months, they need a travel solution, and then they buy the Doona, and that's like a 6 month investment at that point, and that's a
Mm,
heavy investment to then stop when the baby's about a year. So
mm.
again, there's a use case for it, but there's so many other solutions out there, and I will advocate getting baby flat as much as possible and having them in a safe sleep environment and getting them out of those car seats.
Same. Yeah, I love to see a baby be worn, so you can always just wear your
Me
baby
too.
too. Although I do
Yeah.
understand it takes some learning. Okay, so let's keep going down the path of car seats. When we think about car
Okay.
seats, again, obviously safety, but what are we actually looking for in a car seat? We walk up to an aisle of car seats. What should we be evaluating?
So one of the reasons I start with the stroller is because I want the stroller is going to be the thing that's going to last you the longest length of time. Your infant bucket car seat, your rear facing only. A lot of times people don't understand the different words, but this is a car seat that should be, it comes out of the car, can go on the stroller. If you fall in love with the car seat and then fall in love with a different stroller and there's no cohesiveness between the two, then you're back to square one. So start with your stroller, figure that out because that's going to have the longest use case for you, particularly typically up to your child is 50 pounds, maybe 4 or 5 or whatnot. And then you start to look at what car seats have compatibility with those strollers. I am a safety person through and through, and I am going to look at those. And this is where it's hard. It is frankly, it is really hard to navigate that world of safety and car seats because the fact of the matter is there's not a lot of transparency in our country and you really got to dig deep and again they don't really tell you. So yes, every car seat that is on the market has to meet minimums. Absolutely, they have to meet minimums in what our standards are, and I say that's middle of the road, and then it's up to those manufacturers to meet and exceed that. So I think that absolutely the safest car seat is the one that's installed 100% correctly 100% of the time. I will always advocate for that. But if you have the ability and you have the means, definitely dive into some of the brands out there. Kleck is our brand that we love through and through. We love the fact that they have transparency on all of their car seats and they're the only one in the industry doing it. And I love that. I really do. I would rather see somebody go all in on a car seat and not get a stroller. Baby wear, get a stroller that I know you just talked about strollers, but at the end of the day, this is our children. This is what's keeping them safe. And whatever that is for you, there's no judgment, however you want to manage this and whatever car seat is best suited for you. But there's a lot of avenues that you can look at. So I think back to your question, it's really hard to walk up to a wall of car seats and know what to look for, right? It's impossible. But if you start with your stroller first, if that's the path you're going to go, and you want to have so this is another question I think that you have to ask yourself. Do you want to invest in something on a long term in terms of a car seat? Or are you paying for the convenience of having an infant bucket? Because there's multiple ways in which you can go here, right? I have most people, I will say, most people that I work with, they pay for the convenience. They want that life that they're entering into a baby that's very unknown. They want to pay for the convenience of being able to move the baby around seamlessly in a car seat from car to stroller to inside, etc. But that's a 1 year investment. At the end of the day, it's a 1 year investment. So you're going to be back at square one in about a year. And many of those seats that you're going to be looking at next are, what we usually you're going to be looking at a convertible seat, which means it converts from rear facing to forward facing. But many of them have infant compatibility. So if you want to, you definitely have the ability to invest in that convertible car seat that can start from infancy and go all the way up to usually 65 pounds. And that's a really good investment that is going to last you a lot longer than an infant bucket.
Okay, you
Don't
keep
you
talking
think?
about
Deal with it.
different. No, I'm just processing. You keep talking about different types of car seats. Um, can you step us through from I think newborn all
Yep.
the way through what type of car seats are out there and who they might be best appropriate for?
Okay. So first you have your infant bucket. It's a rear facing only car seat. It's typically going to be good for about 4 pounds up to 30, 32 pounds. Most of the manufacturers with the new 2026 standards are going to be cutting that weight limit off at 30 pounds as opposed to 32 pounds. But you're going to see some variables in there over the course of the next year. But typically, you're talking 4 pounds to 30 pounds. However, what we like to say is independent studies do show that after a year, they're more susceptible to head injuries in an infant bucket. So typically by then you are not wanting to keep lugging around this child in an infant bucket. So usually by a year, you're done. So you got your infant bucket. That's your 1 year, 4 months, or 4 pounds to 1 year. It has that ability to move around, be installed on the plane, go from the car to a stroller, inside, etc. You can get multiple bases, etc. Your next stage car seat has an overlap. That car seat is typically going to be called a convertible car seat. Convertible car seat converts from rear facing to forward facing and typically will also start at 4 pounds and go up to 50 or 65 pounds depending on the seat. That seat again can be appropriate for an infant, a newborn. Most of them will come with an infant insert, or some of them you have to get that as an accessory. And that stays in your car. It doesn't have bases. It's not going to go onto a stroller or anything like that. It's going to stay in the vehicle in which you install it. Many of them are easy to move around, but you're not going to have a base that you're going to be attaching it to. Alternatively, you can look at a all-in-one seat. So an all-in-one seat will also start from infancy, but instead of stopping at 50 or 65 pounds, it can go up to a booster. I feel like when you try to do too many things, you never do one thing really well. So it's not my favorite solution. I would much rather see somebody in a convertible seat. I also think that when you're an all-in-one seat, sometimes those height limits are a little bit more limiting between the convertible mode and the booster mode. And getting them out of that convertible, we want to leave them in that convertible as long as possible and get them into a much more mature state, like a 5, 6-year-old or even older. Sometimes, depending on the height and the torso height of the kiddo, they might max out that convertible part and be forced into booster in an all-in-one seat. So I don't love that solution. I'd much rather say go with a convertible, get the longest length of time out of that, and then deal with your next solution. Now, after that, there's two seats. First, we start with a combo seat. A combo seat is a forward-facing only seat, and that's going to be a 5-point harness to a booster. So that sometimes is a seat I will look at for a kiddo that's a little bit younger, but is maxing out their existing convertible, and they're not mature enough to be ready for a booster. So I'm dealing with maybe a 4-year-old boy or something like that, where boys, I have 2 boys, no offense to boys, but they are very challenged in sitting still, right? And those impulse control and that kind of thing is harder for them. So if I can keep them in a 5-point harness longer, I am 100% going to do that. So I've got some tall kiddos and they've maxed out maybe their convertible car seat. I'm going to look at like a Britax Grow With You because it has a very high back, and then it will then transition to a booster. Or if I have a family that has, maybe it's a grandparent and they are dealing with 2 different forward-facing kiddos, maybe one's in a booster, maybe one's in a 5-point, that's a perfect seat because it's very easy to go between a 5-point to a booster when needed. So it's an in-between seat. And then we're going to go into a booster at that point. Just ease into booster. And that's my biggest advice to families, is that there's a freedom in a booster with that seatbelt that these children have never experienced. And we got to get them in a mature state to understand that they have to sit still. They cannot fiddle. They cannot move. They cannot shift and do things. If that seatbelt is not in the right spot and that crash happens, that seatbelt will be rendered ineffective. It is extremely important to hear me on that. Do not put a 4-year-old in a booster. I don't care how mature you think they are. I'm sorry. They are not ready for a seatbelt.
Yeah, it does come with a level of responsibility, and you're handing that responsibility over to your child. They have to be ready
Yeah.
to receive and uphold that. Yeah. I'm so glad you said that. Okay, you've talked about, well, before I do that, does Kleck, you talked about you love Kleck for the safety and the transparency, but then you mentioned not choosing a stroller. Does Kleck not talk to any strollers, you would need a completely
They
different
do.
stroller system. Oh, they do. There are adapters.
They
Okay,
do.
great. So you can get Kleck
Yeah.
and then also a stroller. What stroller would go with Kleck if people are like, absolutely, I'm sold on Kleck just hearing that?
So it's hard because my store is in New England and we deal with a handful of brands that may not be conducive to a lot of people that
Oh,
are hearing this,
right.
right? But in terms of my store, Collect goes on pretty much anything. There's an adapter that will work for Bugaboo, for Silver Cross, for Up a Baby, for Bumble Ride, trying to think, Veer, a couple other ones. It won't work on a Nuna stroller. Nuna strollers only have compatibility with Nuna car seats, but outside of that realm, there's usually an adapter. Kleck makes an adapter themselves to work on Up a Baby. Bugaboo, for instance, and Bumble Ride and Silvercross, they all make an adapter that will work with Maxi Cozy seats. And Maxi Cozy seats are typically going to be a Kleck, a Cybex, a Maxi Cozy, and a Nuna. They all use the same component and they typically will work on the same adapter in that case. But there are some brands out there that have universal adapters that allow for that. So I can't speak to some of the brands that I don't carry, but there are a lot of adaptability. As long as you see a Maxi Cozy adaptability, then typically Kleck is a brand that will work with that.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Now on to something that you said earlier, different bases. If you're dealing with a family that needs or that has multiple cars, needs to move the car seat from one car to the other, you mentioned grandparents. I'm thinking nannies. I'm thinking two working parents that split pickup, that split drop off. Talk to us about
Mhm.
what we need to consider when it comes to thinking about the usage of our car seat and our stroller system and multiple cars. What are the
Yep.
options? What do we need to think about?
So this is again where I will get creative and work with families depending on sort of the vibe I'm getting. Absolutely. You can load yourself up with multiple bases. You can have one in nanny's car, mother-in-law's car, grandparents' car, and each individual parent's car if there's two parents here. That's not really cost effective. Frankly, this is again a 1 year investment. Before you know it, you could be spending an extra $1,000 on bases when you're talking about that many. So, first and foremost, I will typically suggest to people unless they absolutely know. So many of my families that I work with aren't really sure what life after baby's going to look like and maybe who's going back to work, if there's dual parents. If sometimes they're like, I don't know if I'm going to have a nanny. I don't know if I'm going to have daycare. If there's again two people involved, is one going to drop off? Is one going to pick up? Sometimes they just don't know those answers. And typically, if they don't know those answers, what I say is get into life with a baby. Stick with the one base that you have. I, as a CPST, personally am going to educate and teach you how to move that base, and it is extremely easy to do that in most cases. So I will say get into life with a baby, figure out what your long-term goal is or your long-term plan, and then you can always get a second base. If I have families that are like, we absolutely know that we are going to have one drop off from one pickup, so we will need a second solution. Another option is to go with that convertible car seat that accepts an infant in the second car. It's an investment that you're going to need at year one anyway. It's a more expensive solution than the base, but it's a much less expensive long term solution because it's something you're going to need anyway. Another thing is most of the car seats that we sell allow a seatbelt only installation. And if we can educate and teach them and have them feel really comfortable with doing a seatbelt only install, maybe that once a week person or a parent in a pinch or whatnot, then it's an easy solution for them to just install the car seat independently in the car away from the base. I'm a less is more person. We're extremely minimal store. We aren't trying to load people up with a bunch of stuff. It would be really easy for me to sell 5 bases, but to me, that's not really a long-term relationship. It's not a partnership with my customers. And I would much rather figure out a solution that's more cost effective for everybody than sell you 5 bases.
I think that's one of the things that spoke to me most when we first met you. And then we visited your store, and I was like, oh my God, she gets it. It's not about how many things the parents buy, it's more about like, how do I make the tools that you have the most functional and fit into the lifestyle that you either have or are trying to have? Okay, you mentioned that a lot of bases may not be cost effective, but is it safer? Can you talk to us a little bit about the installation process?
So the most of the car seats that we sell, frankly, and again, this isn't going to be for everyone, is Kleck and Nuna, and even some of the Up a Baby car seats now, they use what's called a European belt path. So when you're doing a installation with the car seat in the car, the European belt path allows the lap belt to go over and the shoulder belt to go around. That is a really secure, really solid installation that almost emulates an anterior lumbar or a load leg. So I feel really good about those type of SEPA only installations. I think it's less cumbersome and it's less hard to fuck it up. No, excuse my language, but I think that when you look at some of the other car seats that use a US belt path, which means the shoulder and the lap is going to just go over the car seat, that's where I see the problems arising. I see you start to tighten up the seatbelt and now your car seat slips out, it gets at a wrong angle. It's very problematic. So if you're going with a car seat like a Kiko, it's pronounced Kiko and not Chico. So for those of you who didn't know that, it's the same brand, but it is pronounced Kiko.
That is
If you're going with that,
CHICCO.
yes, yes. If you're going with that brand, that is a US belt path. In most cases, I have heard, and I don't sell Kiko, so I don't know, but I think that their new seat might use a European belt path. So don't quote me on that, but a lot of the Kikos on the market, one of the ones that I did my CPST class in, it was a US belt path. So it was over and I struggled with it. I don't love it. I think it's harder to get secure. So I think that if somebody is going to be taking Ubers a lot or ride shares or whatever, or if they think that they might want to use that US belt or that SEPA only installation, then I do think that ensuring that your car seat has the European belt path is going to be a good solution. That's another, I think, cost savings to look at. You might spend a little bit more money on a car seat that has a European belt path, but maybe it's going to lessen the length of bases and the amount of bases that you have in the long run.
Okay, and talk to us about the latch system.
So latches is lower anchors, right? There's latches an entire system, which includes the tether in the back. No one thinks about it like that. We think about lower anchors in the car and people will call those latch. I just try to I know that it's not necessarily CPST correct in terms of that system, but for the most people that all they really care about is what is clicking in. So typically any car manufactured after 2002 is going to have lower anchors in the outboard positions. You'll hear people mention latch borrowing, things like that. And I see it happen a lot. It's very important I know this isn't your question, but I think this is a good segue in this moment. Read your manuals, people.
Yep.
Like you have to read your manuals. And that might actually be your manual of your car too, because your car is going to have some of their own rules that aren't necessarily going to align with what you read in your car seat manual. I cannot stress enough how important it is. Okay. When people come to us and we do installations, we don't do installations. We show you how to install. You see me install. I teach you how to install. You install and I check your install. The next thing I do is I tell you to read your manual every single month because so many things change and occur during that short period. It's so easy to forget everything I've said, for one, because you're tired. And two, you just don't realize how quickly they're growing. So read your manuals every month, okay, in the first 4 or 5 months. But back to your original question. So again, you're going to have these lower anchors and typically, again, they're going to be in mainly just the outboard positions. There are a couple cars I've seen that do have them in the center. And then you're going to have your bases or your car seat, but we're going to focus on bases. Typically, your bases are going to connect to those lower anchors via latch in 2 ways. One of them is going to be like a seatbelt style latch. So Kiko, Up a Baby, some of those brands, Britax, they've got a soft latch, like a seatbelt style, connects into both sides of those lower anchors. And that's where I see some people trying to do a center installation and they try to borrow the lower anchors from each of the seats. Latch borrowing is typically not allowed. So that's where you have to read both of your manuals and see if that is allowed. It is not safer to install your base or your car seat with a seatbelt over latch. It truly isn't from a safety perspective. It tends to be easier, which is why people want to go with the latch. So I understand, but we can't be doing it wrong. Okay. And then you're going to hear rigid latch. And rigid latch is going to be a rigid component that's going to click into those lower anchors. You won't be able to latch bar with those because they are at the standard distance and they will only work on the latch or lower anchors that's going to be in each of those seats. So typically you're going to install your base via those lower anchors. And in most cases, you cannot do seatbelt and lower anchors. Okay. So that's something I see happening a lot. There are a few brands that allow it. Read your manuals and see which ones those are. But usually you're going to do either or. Okay. And there's some cases where I have to do a seatbelt installation over a lower anchor because I can't get the appropriate leveling with the latch. It really depends on the car. BMW, for instance, has a very weird angle on their seats, a steep pitch, and it doesn't always level well. So there are some cases where you have to do a seatbelt. And then when you talk about your car seat independently, whether it's an infant bucket or another one, you're typically going to be using a seatbelt at that point. Something to remember is there are limits on lower anchors, and it's a combination of your seat weight and your child's weight. So you need to check and make sure that you're not exceeding that weight limit with the lower anchors. I see that happening a lot with convertible car seats. People install it that way, the baby gets heavier, and now here we are, and they've exceeded that weight limit, and we really needed to do a seatbelt installation. Seatbelt can just be harder for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I get it. I totally get it. I don't have kids, but I can imagine I might swing to the convenience factor a little bit, only because I know that what you said was the latch over the seatbelt or seatbelt over the latch. They don't really have any difference. They're equally safe. I think that our team, the number one mistake that we do see is people using them together. And like you said, sometimes, very small cases, it is allowed, but in the majority of cases, it doesn't make it extra safe, even though in our brain
Yeah,
it feels extra safe,
right.
right? You're like,
And that's what you
I'm gonna
hear.
latch them
Yeah.
in and I'm gonna
I'm going to
buckle
double
them
up the
in.
safety. Exactly. I'm going to
Totally.
double up safety. But
Absolutely.
that's, as we know, it doesn't make it double safe. It's
No.
just, and those manufacturers haven't, the reality is they haven't crash tested it like that, or they have, and it doesn't perform in the right way. So it's important to just follow your manual. Don't go on your own devices here. Choose one over the other. And if you do have one of the seats that allows both, you can do it, but it's still not going to more than likely make it safer if you just chose one.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what about so when we help people pick out car seats or we talk about options when it comes to like car seats, the conversation inevitably goes to, and I want to add a mirror and I want to have a camera and I want to have the window covers. But as car seat technicians, we know we're not supposed to do that, right? Those are projectiles. So if we get into a crash, they have got the potential to go flying. They could hit you, they could hit your baby, they could hit anyone else in the car. But I
I know.
also resonate with wanting to see your baby. I
I know.
totally hear you on that.
I know.
What do you tell parents and how do you help them think about their options there?
Yeah. So the first misuse I see that there is no variable here, there's no conversation here. It's seat covers. Okay. We see it all the time. People put towels, people put mats. There's people out there that have recommended the Kleck mat, for instance, under any seat. And the reality is you need to read your manual. Okay. Almost all of the car seats that we sell, they have their own rules and they're very specific. And in most cases, they do not allow anything under the seat unless it's something that they have crash tested and they then manufacture themselves. So Kleck is a brand that makes a mat and it works under their car seats and they've tested this and they are comfortable and they know it's safe. Nuna is a brand that doesn't allow anything under their seats. Britax is a brand who sells a mat. Diono is a brand that sells a mat. There's Up a Baby doesn't allow anything under their seats. And in some cases they shift and they change. But again, back to my point, I could beat a dead horse with this. Read your manual because it's important. The problem is you have these manufacturers that say this is crash tested and everyone reads that and they say, cool, it's crash tested. But what does that mean? There are no standards when it comes to those types of products. So sure, they could go crash test it, but what are we crash testing against if there's no standard, right? you need to default to the manufacturer. There is no variable here. I will not do a car seat installation with a family if they're putting a mat that isn't approved by the manufacturer. It needs to come out, no questions asked. Then we go up, and that goes for this back of you've got your back covers and you've got your under covers. It's all the same, okay? Then we're going to go to mirrors. I get it, right? I was trained by first responders, and first responders are going to say, I don't want your eyes anywhere other than on the road, period. Stop, end point. But I'm a mom. I get it. I really, truly do. So my middle of the road is going to be something soft and flexible and bendy, and that wraps around that headrest in multi points. Get rid of the hard plastic, get rid of the cameras, get rid of the things. You have to think about, in a crash, whatever it is, has the potential to end up on your child's face. Doesn't matter, on their face, right? Imagine that hard piece of plastic going at that speed, and that is a very fast speed. It's going to hurt them, okay? God forbid it does something more than just hurt them. So get it out. You don't need a camera on there, and you really don't need your eyes watching a camera. Okay. I understand it can be scary. I get it. But a small mirror will do the trick, and it hopefully will give middle ground. I will tell you, with mine, I did that with my second. I didn't have anything up. It didn't matter. I knew that everything was going to be okay. I didn't leave choking hazards in the car seats. I didn't attach things to the handle. I didn't let him have food or anything like that as he got a little bit older. I removed that fear by taking away anything that could cause that type of thing. I knew my kids weren't going to be sitting in car seats for 3 hours, and they weren't going to be turning blue, right? I think that there's other ways to combat that, but back to the mirror, yeah, just think of something ending up on their face, keep it soft and flexible. They're super inexpensive. I see them all over the place. Just go that route. The window things, you can get sticky things that stay on the window, vinyl covers that aren't going to fly off. Again, trying to think about everything being a projectile and everything being hard and how it's going to hurt. I do think there's a middle ground, and you could have something that's more vinyl-y that stays. Most cases, I've hardly seen a car that's anywhere near the last 10, 15 years that doesn't have some level of tinting, right? So I do think that, yeah, sometimes sun comes in on their faces, and that kind of is what it is. What else? Get the toys out of the car seats. Get the blinky, all the things out. Just take it out. If you want to have it on there when you put the car seat on a stroller for your quick little errand, then fine, do that. But just not in the car. All right. What else? No aftermarket things. All right. So if the manufacturer didn't make those cute little covers that go on the harness straps or head pillows, don't put it in there. They didn't approve it. They didn't crash test it. Get it out. I know it's cute, but it shouldn't be in there. Actually, that's a really nice segue into clothes.
I love it.
Let's talk
Let's
about
not go
clothes.
into clothes first, because I do have a question about
Okay,
that.
okay.
Do you think that there are car seats that are more comfortable for babies? So I see a lot of people putting on the shoulder pads and the head pillows because I want them to be comfortable. And I always say, they're a baby. They're comfortable. They
Yeah,
don't know anything else. They also just came from a tiny little womb. They're
they're going to
they're
be comfortable
stretched
regardless.
out. They're comfortable. You don't have to worry about them being uncomfortable. Sometimes babies hate car seats, and it makes
Mhm.
parents be like, "Oh, I think they're uncomfortable." So when it comes to this idea of comfort, what do you have to share with parents about that?
Yeah. First, I take off most of the harness covers when we're showing families how to buckle the baby, as long as the manufacturer allows it. Because I do think that they're so bulky, and they're so hard to get a strap covered or a strap tight enough with those covers on. So I actually will take those off, and I
Mm.
think that provides more comfort than having them on. My kids were chunky too, and it was like this on them. So it's much easier to just take them off. I think first and foremost, I would look at fit. I think that some car seats have a better fit than others. Some have really bulky, bubbly infant inserts that make it a really improper fit, which therefore can make it uncomfortable. But truly, it's more uncomfortable for us than it is for them. We talk about head slump, right? Head slump isn't innately bad, but it makes us as parents really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like I'm a tech. I know this. And I will watch my 3-year-old fall asleep and I will pick his head up and I'm stressing about it. And there's no reason to. He can pick his head up. He can reposition his head. It's okay. Now, that's not the case if we're talking about a brand new baby. If you have a brand new baby and you've got some head slump, then there's a fit that's going on that we need to address. Is it an improper angle in the car seat? Is there a cushion that's not in there? Whatever it is, in that case, that's dangerous and we do need to fix it.
For babies that
But
cannot hold their head up by themselves, have
yeah,
not mastered the
yeah.
skill of holding their head up yet. Yeah.
And if they're going forward in the car, especially, then
Mm-hmm.
typically it's incorrect angle, it's incorrect installation, there's something going on that we need to address.
Yeah.
I think that this is our comfort more than anything else. I have this conversation with people. I'm going to go back to Kleck for a second. And this is not a Kleck ad, but this is just, I talk about Kleck a lot. One of the things I hear is that looks so uncomfortable because Kleck uses EPP foam like throughout their seat. So if you take out their seat, it's got 3 inches of EPP foam.
What's
I
that?
equate it to like so EPP foam is the highest rate of foam you can get. It's what's inside of motorcycle helmets. The seat of the bum where your kiddos are sitting on a convertible car seat or whatnot, they're sitting on top of 3 inches of that foam. It's energy absorption. But I also like to equate it to a a Tempur-Pedic bed, right? Like we know that material on first sit is firm, but the idea is that it's forming and conforming to our bodies and allowing it to absorb that energy and be a little bit more comfortable. You look at some of these seats that look super plush and super cushy, but when you really break it down, it's a little bit of fabric over plastic. And the more you sit on something like that, the more it's going to be uncomfortable, right? A layer of foam or a layer of fabric over plastic isn't going to have the longevity of comfort that 3 inches of foam is going to have. So sometimes it's a discomfort at the eye that we think might be uncomfortable, but truly when you break it down, it's not. I think it really comes down to angles and whatnot, but I don't think that kids are innately uncomfortable. I think that they just in their seat. I don't think there's something that could go in there that makes them more comfortable, that makes them not want to scream the first year. I had a kid that screamed the first year in their car seat. I hardly, even in their stroller. I didn't go anywhere without my baby carrier. I pushed an
Mm.
empty stroller around more times than I can count because I ended up taking him out and wearing him. It's painful. I didn't want to go anywhere. My shoulders would be up in my ears like it was a sound I wanted to end. My babies didn't cry like that. Like they little cries to let me know they needed something and then they didn't cry. But in the car, my first screamed and it sucked, but it wasn't about the car seat comfort. He just didn't want to be in it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I just didn't go anywhere. I
Oh my
didn't.
goodness.
I know I did, but I made it work. It was hard. I hear you. It's so hard. So we want to do anything we can to make it stop. I know that
Yeah.
feeling. The reality is it's just a developmental thing. I would say I had a high needs baby my first one around. He extremely independent in so many ways, but he wanted to be worn, he wanted to comfort nurse, he wanted to be next to me and on me at all times and it took him some time. And I think those high needs, high attached babies don't do well in car seats right away, and that's just the reality. It's
Yeah.
not natural,
I was
you
about to
know?
say a
So,
really hard kind of cold plastic is very different than a
yeah.
mom or a body, a human being.
Exactly.
Okay.
And no cushy thing that you put in there or whatnot is going to fix that. They
Yeah.
just want to be held, they want to be on you. And
Yeah.
it's torture. I get it. I've been there. But you just have to figure out what can work for you. And maybe it's capturing those short rides during some sleep windows, nurse, feed, whatever, and then put them in there. Make sure that they're happy in all the other ways that they can be happy in. And just you got to get through it. But
Yeah.
adding a cushion to your car seat or changing your car seat isn't always going to be the answer. It's usually
Yeah.
never the answer.
Yeah. I think that's really good to hear and comforting for a lot of people who do have a baby that probably is not a fan of the car seat. Okay, you were headed down the road of clothing. Talk to us
Close.
about dressing our baby for car seats and think about people who live in the depths of Florida in the hot summer and then
Yep.
people who live in New England with us and Ontario and out in Colorado. Like, where are we or what are we doing in order to accommodate all the seasons for with our baby?
Yeah, I think if you live in a very typically warm, hot or even an extremely cold climate, one of my best ways of combating temperature regulation is wool. Going with a wool fabric car seat, because that wool, I don't think that everybody thinks about wool. I think they always think, oh my God, it's the worst thing for the summer. But wool is absolutely temperature regulating. It's going to keep them cool in the summer and warm in the winter. And that's a really great start to keep them from overheating, but also adding a little bit of, again, temperature regulation. So wool is a fabulous fabric to have in a car seat, and it's also naturally flame retardant. So you're not going to get those chemicals, but you're going to get the temperature regulation. It's like the best of both worlds. So that's the first I would look at. Outside of that, when we talk about extreme heat, be careful with those car seats. They're going to get hot sitting in the sun. Metal on harnesses and things like that, as we forget about it in the infancy, because a lot of times you're taking your car seat in the house, but now you've moved to this next car seat that's sitting in the sun. There's potential for that thing to get real hot. So one of my favorite things is a sunscreen towel. We sell them from Lovebug, and they are absolutely phenomenal, but they're cooling, they're SPF protected, they're breathable, but you can throw that over your car seat and you can keep it nice and cool, like when sun's coming in. And then when you get out of the car, you can drape it over your child. If it's going to protect them against the sun. You could even put it over their face. They can breathe through that sucker. But that's one thing to think about, that a lot of people just don't. Like, things get real hot in there. Doesn't matter the color, it's just going to get hot, especially when you talk about the metals. Then how to dress a child in the heat. I think that's probably the easiest one. It's just not over layering them, and obviously keeping some things cool. And there's lots of products out there. If you find that your car doesn't have great ventilation, there's those little things that have a tube that kind of blow some nice cool air in the back. I can't remember the name of the product. I don't actually sell it, but I know people in really hot climates do use that. And then just one simple layer. I always think things that have breathability, like bamboo and cottons, things that will manage some of that temperature regulation. And then getting them out of that car seat when you're out of the car, not plopping them onto the stroller and walking around in the heat. They're going to get really hot, and there's not going to be any airflow behind their back like there would be with a stroller. In the cold, this is always a tricky one, and this is always everybody's challenges. And there's no one singular answer here. I know people love, we just talk about infancy, right? We talk about infant bucket. There's lots of covers and lots of things you can put over your car seat, but you have to remember that you don't want anything behind your baby. So it's part of that cover. So your child should be making this close a contact to the back of that car seat, without any additional layers in between. So there's some great products out there. We have someone who's local to both he and I, and Dahlia, who created Buckle Me Baby Coats, and she's amazing, and we love her product. But that's a little plug for her. But buckle those car seat coats, there's no fill in the back. Straps can go right over the child, and the coat can go over. So that's a great solution there. The car seat covers, if people want to use those, think of shower cap styles, things that stretch over the car seat that don't go under the baby. Those are a great solution. I personally was a blanket person. I threw a blanket over the car seat, walked out to the car. It was something I could grab as the car warmed up if I didn't have like remote start. And I just took it off. They're going to end up overheating in the car if you keep those things on in the car. So these things that I could easily pull off as the car warmed up, I think are a great solution. Just nothing puffy, anything with loft. So if you could squeeze it and it takes a while to refill back up, we never want that to be on a child under those car seat straps. So things that have synthetic fills, like Patagonia's brand that has a really thin synthetic fill in a coat, you could try that. A nice test for yourself would be to put something on, buckle your child, take them out, do not loosen the straps, take off that cover, put them back in, and see if there's a big gap between those straps and the child. And if there is, you know that you shouldn't be using it. The problem is that your child can become a projectile with those really thick things. The straps are just not going to hold them like they need to with all of that. It's going to come off. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
they'll just slip right through.
and yeah. And my kids overheated too. They did not like that. As they got older, they were perfectly content putting their arms through a coat like this until they warmed up, and then they took the coat off themselves. Obviously, babies aren't going to be doing that, but yeah, just keep it easy, things that you can take off in the car. And yeah, that's a little extra step that you have to now put their coat on before you fully get out of the car, but it's going to keep them safe in the car, and that's just the reality. And
Yeah.
to be honest, we should be doing that too as adults. We don't think about that, but we shouldn't be wearing any bulky things. Our seatbelt should be right on us. So take off those coats when you get in the car too and keep yourself safe.
I'm so guilty of that. I never take off
I
my
know, me
coat
too.
in the winter, and I wear the bulkiest coats because I get so cold up
I
here,
know.
and it does cross my mind. I always am like, oh, I
Yeah.
really should take this off. I'm like, how can I? I'm going to freeze to death if I do. You guys, you can
I've
hear
changed so many things.
of your
Go ahead.
lifestyle of after being
Yeah.
a car seat
Since
technician.
becoming a
Yeah,
tech.
same. Yeah,
Mhm.
and I find myself not judging other people on the road, but just being extra observant and wishing I
Yeah.
could share a little bit like, oh, you should know this,
Yeah.
or oh, just one little change. It
I
never comes from
know.
a place of judgment ever because honestly, I was like mind blown at the things that are proper use when I took the car seat technician class. And it just shows me like how little education we have about this, which I'm not that
Mhm.
surprised. But anyway, you guys can hear Dahlia on episode 202. I actually have her on to talk about the buckle me coats. So if you live in a cold climate or you live in a place that gets really cold or you travel, check out episode 202 to hear Dahlia about her things. Jamie, what do
That's
you feel about the 7 a.m. infant? They're like covers, so they don't go behind your baby. Do you like them? I see
yeah.
them a lot.
Yeah. I use those. I
Yeah.
have them in the
Oh,
store.
okay.
That and JJ Cole, those are two brands that we have. They make other products, like they have the Nido and they have a few things. That one of their products, the Nido, I believe, it has a hole in the back. Now it's a removable piece, and so realistically, it should allow the child to make that close contact to the car seat back. The biggest thing I have with that one is that there's a lot of fabric around. And when you get into the car, you really need to make sure it's out. And I do worry about crashes and things flipping over and suffocation risks. So I do try to caution people with that one, maybe using it less while you're in the car. But their other one, the Cocoon, is great. It's just a shower cap style. I still recommend taking it off when you get into the car, but it's super easy to just throw over the top, get out of the car, do what you need to do, and or if you're coming into the car. So any shower cap style, 7 a.m.'s great, JJ Cole's great. There's some other brands out there. Some of the car seat manufacturers make their own shower cap style covers now, so those are fine too. I think people try to get one cover sometimes that can work between like car seats and strollers, and that's usually just never going to work. That's not going to transition well at all.
Mm-hmm.
So car seat covers separately. It's a lot easier in infancy. It's always going to be a little more challenging as they get into a convertible car seat or at toddlerhood because you're trying to get to the car, especially in these really cold climates. You want to keep them warm in and out of the car, but take those blankets off, take the covers off, the coats and stuff, get to the car, take it off. I know it's an extra step and it is a pain, but it's what we got
You
to
have
do,
to.
you
Yeah,
know?
you have to.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
Jamie, we have come to the point in the show where I have the most requested question. So this
Oh gosh.
season is requested by our listeners and our followers on social media. So in the past, I've always chosen the topics and I've always chosen the guest. And so this time, what I did was I put out questions and I wanted to know, what do you want to know about? And car seats and strollers continued to come up. And so then I took each topic and I put out more question boxes and said, now about this topic, what do you want to know? And I was simultaneously blown away by the number of people who had this question. And then when I stopped to think about it, I was like, no, it makes so much sense. And that is the Nuna and the Vista stroller systems really worth it? It seems like it has become a status symbol. Everybody wants them. They're very fashionable. If you go to any big city, if you watch any influencer online, but people want to know, is it worth the hype? And so, what can you tell us about these two brands when it comes to meeting all the things that we have talked about in terms of how to pick a stroller that truly works for your family?
Oh, okay. So this is not a simple answer at
I
all.
figured as much.
Um, it's not because, again, what works for some doesn't work for others. And there are so many other amazing brands that are very similar priced or even higher priced. So It's not, and to be 100% transparent, I sell both of those brands, but they are not my number one brands. Okay. My number one stroller brand is Bugaboo. My number one car seat brand is Kleck, well over both Uppa and Nuna. But this is not a dig on Uppa and Nuna. So if Uppa
Nope.
and Nuna hear this, I'm not digging you at all. But I just think that, again, there's a use case for everybody. There's a
Sure.
customer that's going to come in and wants a Nuna, pushes a Nuna, and decides that's not exactly what I expected. I want something a little different. I think in New England, we are in up a baby land. This is a
Mm-hmm.
Massachusetts brand. So it's heavily saturated in this area. And while it works for a lot of people and a lot of people absolutely love it, it's not always the best stroller for certain people.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people come in and want a stroller that can have some expandability. So that means it can expand to add a second child. And an inline stroller, so a stroller that does a double from front to back, there's a lot of limitations. And when we show people, hey, this is your UPPA inline solution, this is your Silver Cross inline solution, this is your Nuna top to bottom solution, and here's your Bugaboo side to side solution, they realize that there's less limitations on a stroller that's expanding versus a stroller that's trying to take their existing footprint and make it a double. There's a lot of height limitations. I get families that are tall and they don't realize that you're going to have some issues if you try to make that a double. So to the hype, you pay for what you get. This is the case for every single thing, friends, right? Like a $20 pair of jeans is not the same as a $200 pair of jeans. It's not, right? It's just the world in which we live. It doesn't mean that something isn't good enough for you, right? It doesn't mean that the stroller that's half the price isn't good enough. I think it just depends on where your expectations lie. I am definitely a quality over quantity person. I would much rather somebody get something that's going to last them and make better use of their money and have that longevity, not have the 7 strollers that these articles say people are going to have. But that comes at a higher initial price point.
Sure.
But I guarantee you it's going to come at a much lower long-term price point in the long run. Okay. So whether it's Nuna or Appa, I don't know. There's other things out there that are equally as beautiful that are higher price point even. Silver Cross, that's an amazing brand that a lot of people in the States just don't know about, but it's actually higher than Appa. But again, quality over quantity, and you pay for what you get.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. I think I've reached the end of all of my questions. Although I want to do a quick round, a lightning round. I'm going to throw out some topics and you tell me just the
Okay.
best brands or the best car seat slash features for that. Before we get there, in terms of weight, can you tell us the range or the average weight of a car seat of what we can expect? And the same thing for a stroller.
The weight of the product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's
Most
the
infant
average of
buckets are
those
gonna,
two?
yeah. Most of them are going to come in around 9 pounds. And there are definitely seats on the market that are coming in at a lower, but just let me tell you that there's going to be an asterisk in most of those situations that's going to have a disclaimer that says when you add the canopy and the infant insert, it might actually raise that weight up to closer to 9 pounds. There's hardly a giant variable at this point in time. There's some seats that are a little bit higher, some seats are a little tiny bit lower, but most of them are going to fall right around the 9 pound marker. Strollers are going to have your biggest variable. Your jogging strollers are going to weigh the most. Your travel strollers like the yo and the butterfly are going to weigh the least. Your middle road strollers that face both directions, that have the bassinets and whatnot, you're probably looking at anywhere, the average, the Vista, the Bugaboo Donkey, the Veer, they're all falling at about 27 pounds. Some of them will fall around the 22-pound marker, and then you might get a little tiny bit higher. Just keep in mind that most of that situation includes the entirety of the stroller, and you're not usually picking everything up together. You're usually taking the seat off and really dealing with the frame. But your jogging strollers, like a Bob or something, they're going to weigh the most. Absolutely.
Yeah, they need the weight to just be stable,
Yeah.
right? To keep it from tipping over. Cool. Okay, I'm ready for the lightning round. Are you?
Okay. Okay. Yes.
All right, here we go. What stroller is most durable?
Bugaboo.
What car seat is most durable?
Ooh, durable. I don't think durable when I think car seats, but I'm going to say almost all of the ones, Bugaboo, Nuna, all of them are going to be durable.
Nice. What is the best running stroller?
Ooh, that's so personal. I love Bumble Ride, but Thule's a great brand. Honestly, I know this isn't lightning, but you got to jog with the stroller to really figure it out. There's so many weird features, but if I was going to jog, which I do not, I'm going to use the Bumble Ride Speed.
I remember coming to your store and you were like, no, really, take it out on the sidewalk and
Yeah,
like
you have to
run
jog.
around with it. Yeah, and it
Yeah.
did make a difference.
Yep.
Okay, best travel stroller.
Bugaboo Butterfly.
Best stroller for a family that definitely wants more children.
Bugaboo Donkey.
The best do-it-all stroller slash system.
You can make a system out of anything.
What is returned the most?
Nothing because we work with people and we make sure it's right.
Okay. What is loved by families the most?
Oof. Across all categories
Yeah,
or product. Like, oh my God.
you choose whatever you want to say.
I think that what's surprising to people is probably the newborn set on the Trip Trap versus a bouncer. I think it gets used a ton and people don't realize it. It was one of my favorite things personally.
Okay, that's not a car seat or a stroller for listeners. That's
Oh, do
that's
you
like
want
a
car seat or
basic.
strollers?
People are like,
Car
"What
seat
is the
wise,
trip
I'm gonna
trap?"
go. I know. Car seat wise, I'm gonna go with the Collect Link because I just think it's the nicest release. It's the easiest installation. It's a fantastic fit.
Nice. Okay, and then if you had, what two brands do you see coming together for the best combo the most often?
See, again, my store is going to be Kleck and Bugaboo, but I see Nuna and Up Baby come together really nicely together. Kleck and Bumble Ride come together really nicely. Nuna and Silvercross really nicely. There's so many ways and so many brands that we can make a really great travel system out of. I think, again, it starts with the stroller first and we add the car seat, but typically those are the things that we see marriage together most.
That's awesome. All right. Jamie, thank you so much for being
You're
here. I feel like you've given us
welcome.
so much information for people to now start that journey, right? When you find out you're pregnant, you're like, okay, we got to get this little kid to and from places. Where do we start? This is a great foundation. If people wanted to work with you, where can they find you? What kind of services do you offer? And how can people nationally connect with you for information and consults, any of that?
Yep. So you can find us at hipbabygear.com. On Instagram, we're Hip Baby Gear. On Facebook, we're HBG Boutique. Don't ask. You can always message us, customer service at hipbabygear.com. Our role in this world with people in this space is truly to be advisors. It's not a retail store. We are not sales associates. We are advisors. We're part of your village. We want to be part of your team. I think that if what this segment might have done for you is actually create more confusion because at the end of the day, there's no one size fits all. It truly is working with people, figuring it out. I've had lots of consultations with people in New York and around the country, and it's not the same. There's personal things that come into play, and it's about working together to find that solution that's best suited for you. So you can DM us. I try to be active on social media, absolutely, but we are in the store working hand in hand every day. We have two locations. We're in Marblehead, Massachusetts, and we're in Linfield Market Street in Massachusetts as well. Most of our staff are CPSTs. And again, like I said, we're here to advise and to work with you. It's a family, it's a fun time. Like we hope if you're local, you can come and visit us.
And it really is the best way to go, you guys. When we went, our team got to put our hands on all of the products. We got to see the features that Jamie was talking about. We got to feel the difference in the weight. We got to actually push them. It was just a phenomenal experience. Jamie, truly, thank you so much for being here. One last thing, you will help people build their baby registries. Is that right? How do they take advantage of that?
You can book an appointment. Right now, we only have in-person appointments, but if you send us a message, we can do a virtual. We use a universal platform as well. It's called myregistry.com. You would kick it off through Hip Baby Gear. But again, we're extremely minimal, and our goal really is to work with families and figure out their exact needs and fundamentals and help them navigate the process. We're not about throwing a ton of stuff on there. We truly aren't. We're about figuring out hey, if you have 20 people coming versus 50, like what's the best thing and what's going to get you going with the baby in the beginning and how to suit those needs. So if they want to reach out to us, absolutely just shoot us an email, hit us up on Instagram. We can do virtuals. If you're local, again, come in. You can make an appointment right on our site.
I love that. Oh my goodness. All right, you guys. I feel like we just made your birth plan for your car seat and your stroller with our car seat and stroller doula, Jami.
Yes.
This was
Hi.
super fun. This was super fun. Honestly, Jami, thank you so much for sharing all of your
Of
wisdom.
course.
And listeners, thanks for being here with us. I will see you next time. Until then, connect with Jami on Instagram, and you can find me on all socials at Tranquility by HeHe. I'll see you next time. Bye, y'all. Thanks for joining us. I'll see you next time on the Birth Knowledge Podcast. Until then, head over to Instagram and find us at Tranquility by HeHe and give us a follow. You can also check us out at thebirthlounge.com.